Regarding agenda item 1, public access to meetings. This meeting is open for public attendance. You may also watch the meeting remotely via live stream. Agenda item 2, we have meeting opening and roll call. Carlin, can you please call roll and verification of quorum?
Ms. Erler.
Here.
Mr. Lepak.
Here.
Mr. Kowalski.
Here.
Mr. Pope.
Here.
Ms. Portson. Here. Mr. Robbie.
Here.
Mr. Shader.
Here.
Mr. Summers.
Here.
Ms. Bushman.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. If we could stand for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, agenda item 4, public comments. We did not get any emailed comments, and we don't have anyone that signed up for comments. So we will move to agenda item 5, presentations. We have our communication report with Sarah O'Donnell.
Hello, everyone. I think while Mr. Nyman pulls that up, I'll just go over, this year I wanted to do some inaugural school communication awards. As a shop of one, it can be really tough to kind of do all of the things. So one of the things I've really tried to do in the last couple of years is some capacity building just among other staff members. And one of the things I wanted to do this year was take a moment to just recognize the really great work that those folks have done. So we awarded the Excellence in Internal Communication Award to Alexa Schultz from Human Resources, the Silent Hero of Crisis Communication to Teresa Bentz, Educational Services, Social Media Star Award to Samantha Pionic, Jefferson Elementary School, Social Media Star Award to Lisa Vigut, Food Services Department, Social Media Storyteller Award to Melissa Schleifer, Washington Elementary School, Community Outreach Excellence Award to Carla Lockman, Boston School Forest, Student Engagement Award to Todd Vanderloop at SPASH, and then the Teacher Communication Advocate Award to Kate Castor, also at SPASH. Something I'm hoping we're able to continue to do as we move forward. And if you're interested, we did a little write-up on each of those and shared that in the Key Communicator earlier last week. For May, obviously, we're just really excited to be celebrating all of the great things that happen at the end of the school year. So really busy and just really a great opportunity to celebrate students and staff and just our community at large. So projects mostly included those end of year celebration coverages, graduation and senior spotlights. The Jean LaRose Elementary Track Meet is always a favorite. Pre-production for our Beyond Expectations back to school video that'll happen in the fall. We got a lot of really good coverage done early for that this year. Website design, and then the inaugural School Communication Awards. Chris, you can go to the next slide. Website performance is very much where we would expect it to be, with over 25,000 unique visitors in the last month. And again, as we have seen all year, those two most visited pages after the landing page are that staff resources page and the SPASH home page. Social media performance, with May being just such an exciting time, we see just a lot of engagement on social media. So Facebook saw a 31% increase in impressions over the previous month, with a 113% jump in engagements per impression. So what we would typically expect to see, we'll see a huge dip for June just because we're not sharing that same level of content or engagement. But really nice to see just the opportunity to share those stories and that people are engaging with them. Very similar on Instagram, 109% increase in impressions and 116% jump in engagements over the previous month. E-newsletter performance, we had one internal e-newsletter, the District Source, that was developed and managed by the Communication Office. We had really high click-through rate on that of 25%, 3 external e-newsletters, the Education Connection, and then a very specific email that I do just for grads and their parents, with a total of 16,000 views and a really high click-through rate of 23%. Most of that is due to that last Education Connection is just links to albums. So all of the pictures I've taken throughout that previous month, people are just taking and downloading those pictures. So it's really cool to see that engagement there, which drives that. Usually that click-through rate hovers around like 6%, 8%, so it's a really nice jump. media relations. We're pretty slow during the month, mostly just graduation coverage. We had folks come in and take a lot of great pictures, We also had a local company, Express, who really wanted to do a lot of work towards paying off those student lunch debts. So we had a number of pieces of coverage throughout that. And I believe I saw an email from Mike earlier today. She was able to raise over $5,000 in about 3 weeks, thank you, for that program. So that Money for Meals program received a lot of coverage, and really thankful to her for taking that on at the end of the school year. As we look at just where my time was, communication obviously was really high, 63%, school board items 14%, secondary schools 7%, and most of my deliverables focused really on that content, so photography, community relations, copywriting, website management, and videography. So really the good kind of meat of it. As we look forward to June focuses, really taking some time to dig on that website. I know we've been talking about that all year. Referendum really sidetracked my ability to just focus on that. So I'm looking forward to having some quieter months here coming up where I can really dig into that and get that where it needs to be, hopefully for that launch here in the next upcoming months. And then reviewing our annual work goals, that gap analysis, just to look and see, what worked from last year, what can we do better, and then continuing to provide that communication support to others who stay with us through the summer. With that, I'll take questions. Or just say thank you.
Thank you for all your work.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah.
Lots of graduations, so thank you for all of your work documenting those special memories. Okay, we have the agenda item 5B, Superintendent's Report with Corey.
Sure, great transition, Jen. So we had 5 wonderful graduation ceremonies that happened in May. It was just a pleasure to be part of every single one of those. The staff did a great job organizing them, and just to see all of the students and their families just so happy at this time of year. So we wish our graduates the best of luck in the future with whatever they choose to do. In addition, I want to thank the staff for all of their hard work this year. We had another successful year. I want to thank families for sharing their children with us. And I just want to hope that wish that staff and families have a wonderful and safe summer. In addition to that, we have 2,557 students who have signed up for summer school, which starts on Monday, and they are signed up for about 4,803 courses. So there's a little uptick this year compared to last year at this time. So that's just absolutely amazing.
So the number again was what?
2,557 students enrolled in 4,803 courses. That does not include our Camp Invention or the Online Learning Center students yet.
And compared to last year?
It's a little uptick. Last year at the end of the summer, we had 2,641. So once we include OLC and Camp Invention, it's likely to be higher.
I would anticipate closer to, 2,650, 2,660.
And I had a community question about the lunch program. Is that still available for the entire community?
Yes. Yep.
So anyone from the community, whether your child's enrolled in summer school or not, can receive lunch
For free.
Yep.
for free.
18 and under.
Yep.
18 and under, so even kids who are younger than our school
Yes.
age.
Correct. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Additionally, we just found out at the end of last week that we were awarded 3 significant grants from the Department of Public Instruction. It's the 21st Century Learning Grant that we did in collaboration with the Boys and Girls Club. So Jefferson Elementary, Madison Elementary, and McKinley Elementary will each, and the district will receive $100,000 for before and after school programming, with the possibility of receiving that same amount for 4 additional years after this coming year. That's $1.5 million. That's significant.
How were
So
those sites chosen?
they were chosen based on free and reduced numbers.
Okay.
Yep. So Chris and his team at those buildings, and then the Boys and Girls Club, Angela Voss, who is a grant writer, and her team did a significant amount of work to make that happen. So Chris deserves a lot of credit,
Who
and
does Chris?
the Boys and Girls Club does as well.
Well, and Madison is a new,
Addition.
I mean, a new
Location.
school site for the Boys and Girls Club, so that's,
Yep. And then my last item, and then I know G has a couple things to talk about under legal updates. Just know that the legislature has adjourned for the year. There has been legal activity surrounding Act 10 that's suspected to rise to the Supreme Court, but that's all I know at this point. So we'll watch that and learn more as information becomes available. G.
The other legal thing that I was tracking is the Act 20 for the new reading program that's coming in. The state legislature is right now is suing the governor. What I get out of it, reading through all the lawyer stuff, this is the best I can do, is they're fighting over the money. Who's going to control it? So wherever that ends up, the program's going forward regardless. Okay. Now, can I say one other thing? Sure. I had a webinar between now and the last meeting. I got to talk with a bunch of people from around the state on other school boards. So it was nice because we got an idea, school boards run differently around the state. I'm surprised, at how differently they're run by different districts. For example, two of them, Sussex, which is similar to us, kind of a similar size, they hold like 5 or 6 workshops per year, which I was amazed at. And then another one, a small one, Cochrane Fountain City. I think it's way in the west part of the state, right? They meet like 2 or 3 times a month. It's like, it's a little town. Don't you have enough? Didn't you talk enough last night? But it was interesting that they meet, that they conduct their business in a wide variety of fashions. What's best for their school district, I would imagine. So that's it.
Okay, thank you, G. Any questions?
G, if I could just maybe tag on one thing to G's report on Act 20, just an update. And there are certain elements of the legislation that have been delayed. One that's significant for our district that I think the board and community should be aware of is a shift in the required universal screener that was intended to be identified. That has not been named yet at this point, and the plan was to administer that for the first time in September. The requirement now will not be until early January. We will continue with the universal screening process that we have in place, which is in alignment with Act 20 legislation, to administer the assessment 3 times per year. We just don't know if the assessment we're currently using will be the identified universal screener for the state. So we're on hold waiting for that, but I don't feel like it's a good decision to not administer it while we wait for the announcement. The other piece is the diagnostic assessment that will be required for all students scoring below the 25th percentile was intended to be named in early June. We're still waiting on that announcement, and the projected date at this point in time is July 1st.
Just a simple thing here, as I look forward at the meeting agenda, I just saw legal updates, and none of this was, unusual or shocking or anything, but I looked at and went, legal updates, and there was nothing there. It'd be nice if there is stuff and you're coming up, or if you're gonna bring something of significance with legislative update, or if you had legal update, it'd be nice to get updated personally ahead of time, so you got time to look at it yourself, to know, oh, what are they talking about? Oh, okay, I've been following that Act 10 thing in Abbotsford too. Okay, I knew that was coming. I saw the Act 20 stuff too. None of this was a shock to me, but it was at least looking at this going, okay, what are they gonna talk about? And I had no idea until I got here.
Sure, we can add that.
Just bullet points of the, yeah,
What are we looking at? Yeah.
sure.
well, and maybe just, so I think, was it last year, Jen?
Yes.
That we actually had asked board members who were interested in providing legislative updates to kind of say that they wanted to, and I think at that point it was G and Alex and Ted who kind of stepped up to say that they would kind of monitor that. So that's just an update on kind of
Sure.
How we
The formation of the.
formation
yeah,
of, like-
legislative, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we're doing anything different than you could look at yourself. But I I do remember a long time ago, we always had a legislative report just to make sure.
And
Everybody
WASB
knows.
does a nice job of informing board members of what's being worked on too.
Yep.
Okay.
We can add that. Thanks, Jim. Okay, moving to agenda item 6, consent agenda. This includes the minutes of the organizational school board meeting on May 13th, 2024. Minutes of the prior school board meeting on May 13th, 2024. Approval of the schedule of monthly bills and employment recommendations. I'm looking for a motion to present the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
I'd like to second it.
Okay, Carlin, can you please call roll for a roll call vote?
Ms. Erler,
Yes.
Mr. Kowalski,
Yes.
Mr. Pope,
Yes.
Mr. Shader,
Aye.
Mr. Summers,
Yes.
Ms. Portson,
Yes.
Mr. Robbie,
Yes.
Mr. Lepak,
Yes.
Ms. Bushman.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Carlin.
Does that mean there's no discussion on that?
No, not on consent.
Not on consent.
Unless you pull it out, you have to pull out consent agenda items.
Oh, okay. So I'll have to ask a question later then.
But I'm gonna ask a question. But it's not concerning that. I see Beth is here. I'm just asking, how are we doing? Is that appropriate to ask now? As
Oh, I
far
thi- I
as
think-
filling positions?
Beth is going to come up and
We
talk
can talk
about
about
the,
that.
yeah,
Yeah,
she's
talk
on the
about it.
agenda
Yeah.
for under human resources.
Yep.
Okay, moving on to agenda item 7, business services. We have the Business Services and Human Resources Committee report with Ted.
Okay. Thank you, Jen. We had a number of different reports, beginning with the preliminary report, which Dr. Owens is here and will share with us. Would you want to do that first, or should I go through the other ones quickly? Go for that?
We can cover the preliminary budget very relatively quickly. The first slide in here talks about the reason for the preliminary budget. The law statute allows us to create a preliminary budget for the purpose of meeting the bills and obligations between now and the time that the budget is formally adopted at the end of October. So that's the purpose of the preliminary budget, the reason it's there. Obviously, it's very incomplete and will change significantly in a number of areas as we move forward. But it's really there just basically so that we can go ahead and pay bills in July and August and September and through October until the board adopts the final adoption. Next slide. You'll see this slide now, and at the end, we'll begin here and we'll end here. And the purpose of this slide basically is to, in one particular slide, capture a great deal of information. You have your funds on the left-hand side, beginning with the general fund, and then you have the preliminary budgeted expenditures, which total $141,000. And then the two columns to the right include revenue in the form of revenue and tax levy. For your edification on the left-hand side, near the middle, I have the total revenue of $140,431,000. That allows you to see what the total of the revenue is. Of course, we predict a drawdown in the debt service. That's normal as we retire debt. And there's also some in the capital projects, which was planned for. So the levy in this amount here comes up to about $45,000. It's a 6% increase. We've had a 4% increase as a projection, which I mentioned during the referendum. I would use that as a standard. That brought that $6.6 billion equalized valuation for the district. And then the levy rate is $6.83, which is currently the projected rate that we used during the referendum as well. On the next slide, this is the budget. Far right column is the budget for next year. I've highlighted with the arrows that you can see that the revenue and the expenditures match. With the introduction of the $8,750,000, we're able then to balance the budget for this next year coming up and meet some of the other increased costs, such as the salaries, as well as the $2 million increase in health insurance and things like that. And then it goes down through the special projects, which would be balanced in this, the debt service, which is not balanced and shouldn't be, because we're paying off debt and levying for 2 different periods, and it drops as you go. So on the next slide, you see your capital projects. This is the 46 fund, then food service, trust fund, which is 0, community service fund, and then there's a period there where we total up all the funds, 141 million, excuse me, but when you subtract the 13.4 million of transfer, which is the amount of the local cost of special education, you get a net expenditure of 127 million. I wish it were 1,000. And then, of course, that brings us down through the same information you saw on the very first slide, where we have a 6% increase in the budget. The next slide.
I had a question about the previous slide.
Questions I hear?
Yeah, on the capital projects fund, is that the fund that we get reimbursed half of it the following year? Is that the proper?
Say that again?
On the capital projects fund,
Yes?
that one we get reimbursed for what we use, half of that, correct? So the state reimburses us up to half of?
When it's put in the fund, we got it, yes. That's correct. We're about 57% aided district, so we got state aid and about 57% on that,
Okay.
yes. You'll see a series of 3 slides coming up here. The first one here is revenue, the next 2 will be expenditures. And they're all laid out in the same form. Going down the left-hand side, you have your semi-detailed sources, and then in each column is a fund, 10, 20, 30, in the major fund roll-up. And you'll see the total by fund at the bottom, which of course matched that first slide. And then you see the total bottom right-hand, 140 million in total revenue. As I mentioned, this is an estimate. We don't know what our third Friday count is. We don't know what our state aid's going to be. There's just a whole number of items that are still remaining. The next slide is the first in a series of 2 for expenditures. I present them to you in object format and then in function format. And those of you that have been around know the object format. I always hold up a pen and say, this is a general supply item of 411. And that comes under the 400 objects, which is non-capital objects. And that same layout that you see is there with your major object on the left-hand side, and in each column for the respective funds. And you see the 141 million in the bottom right. The next slide is the same information but presented to you in function order. The function is the purpose or the function in which this pen, for example, is used. If it's used in my office, it's under 251,000 function. If it's used in elementary school, it's 110,000. If it's used in the office of the principal, it's 241,000. And if it's used in art, it's 122,000 function. So that's kind of a little taste of how that's moved around a little bit depending on its use. But again, the same layout. You have your functions on the left. You have the columns going down in each column row. And again, that totals 141 million as it should. It should match, of course, the other previous slide. The next slides will just be a few of them on the revenue limit worksheet. I'm not going to go into great detail here. I'm working on updating the presentation and the web page to the current types of revenue limit worksheet because the other one's kind of dated now. But the upper portion in yellow that you see, that's from the prior year, and that total of 78 million that you see there is going to wind up on the next page on line 1 when we get there, and that's where we kick things off. You've heard of the 3-year rolling average. Those are those 2 blocks in the middle. You see 21, 22, and 23 with total FTE in each column. That's the first of a 3-year rolling average. That average is to the right in the center. It's 7,112. So that's the average of that 3-year period. Then when you go down to the next block of 3 years, it pushes out 2021, moves everything over and drops in 2024. And you get a new 3-year rolling average period, and that comes up to, you see the 7,118. Now, that number there is is preliminary. If you'll notice for 23, 24, the same numbers are there. I have no idea what they will be, so we just copied last year's number in the average, et cetera, to use for these numbers. Excuse me, go back just a little bit.
sorry.
One last number at the very bottom, that's our equalized value. That's of the district, which was set at 4% increase. I don't know what it's going to be. I won't know until sometime after the 1st of October, but I'm using 4% at this particular point. Next slide then is the second page of the revenue limit. That top number, 78 million, is what came from that worksheet area on the left, carryover from the prior year. The 7,112 number is the first of the 3-year rolling averages. When that's divided into that starting number, you get about $11,008. I think that's $11,008.50 some. I can't quite see it from here. And then what happens is you have the opportunity to add $325 from that because of the legislation and the per pupil increase. This is the dollar amount that 6 out of the last 8 years we didn't have anything. I guess I got 6 out of the last 9 because this last year we did get the 325. But that was the number that was missing quite a bit. So 325 is added into that. It's brought down. And then the new 3-year rolling average, 7,100, and I can't see it, 18 or whatever it is,
Yeah.
is multiplied times that to get a new revenue limit number that we're starting with. And then to that, you begin to add a number of things like recurring referendum items or adjustments. And you have different recurring and non-recurring exemptions that are added in the formula, till you come down to a number at the bottom there, which is about 94 million. And then you subtract the estimate from the state aid from that, and you get about 40 million, of which 2 million of that in the bottom left is coming out of the 38 fund, and the difference is what we levy. We can't levy any more than that. That's prescribed. We basically are just subtracting from our revenue limit, we're subtracting the state aid, and the difference is what we can levy. At the very bottom on the left, there are 2 numbers. One is for the 39 fund. This is referendum debt. Of course, that's irrepealable. We have to include that. And then there's a little bit of amount for the 80 fund. And then that totals the 45 million in the bottom right-hand corner, which gives us our mill rate. It gives us the factor, which if you multiply by 1,000, gives the mill rate that we had at the beginning of the slide, which was 683. So on the next slide, we're right back where we started from, and you can see kind of in a real fast encapsulation how we arrived at those numbers. Where we went through each fund, built each activity on a preliminary basis, totaled it all up, ran through the revenue limit worksheet, made adjustments in the budget, made adjustments, et cetera. And that's what we came up with. So that's what we would recommend at this point for adoption, is a motion to accept this as a preliminary budget only.
So just the reality of this is we've got like some key pieces of information that we don't know yet. So
Well,
we don't know what our,
I don't know enrollment.
the number enrollment, we don't know.
Equalized value.
We don't know,
State aid.
increase in state
I
aid.
don't know
So-
what my special needs scholarship program is gonna be. I don't know what the
Right.
Wisconsin Parental Choice Program amounts are. So there's about 5, 6 numbers that we just won't know till about the 15th of October.
Right, but we have to adopt this so we can pay our bills until,
Yes, ma'am.
yes, okay. All right, I would move approval of the preliminary budget as presented.
Second.
Okay, motion by Meg, second by G. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Thank you, Professor Owens. That was a quick synopsis. We appreciate that. Next is the property and casualty insurance bid, and
don't say-
this was an interesting thing we had done at committee, and it took an hour to go through this. You have it in your packets, too. Professor Owens is here for any questions also, but if I could do a quick summary on it, I would. He'd gone through it. The T.E. Brennan Company is a company that we had worked with and paid for to help us figure out which is the best insurance company for us to do. And they looked at all the different variables that were in it, and it's a quite detailed report that they came back with too. After going through it and seeing it, we talked about the different things and the different companies that were available. The bottom line we came up with was that the company had a little bit more robust, R&R Insurance had a little more robust coverage for us, taken as a whole, and that the bid was essentially $123,000 less than the competition. So at committee, we came up with a recommendation that we move this forward to the board for recommendation. If there are any other questions, I'd ask for Dr. Owens to address them.
Okay, if no questions, we're looking for a motion to approve R&R Insurance as the 24-25 property and casualty insurance agent provider as documented.
So moved.
Second.
A motion made by Will, second by Dennis. Discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Next at committee, we talked about the 10-year capital improvement plan. This is an ongoing report that we see every year, and it's done for the entire district so that we are not blindsided by sudden expenses. Oftentimes, these things will happen just because the reality of life, but we can prepare as best we can. And so this 10-year plan is a rolling procedure that we've been doing, and the information is in your packet. This year's expenditures are going to look like mostly roof repairs on different parts of PJ. And so there was some more information going down the pike on it, but it's a pretty standard improvement plan, and it looks pretty good. I'd look for a motion to approve it.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Dennis, second by Meg. Discussion?
Can I ask a
Sure.
question? This is just personal observation. You were there when we were in pods, and that heater was just rackety. I mean, and I asked my wife, because she taught there like a million years ago, because they were doing it then too. And I asked you, like, can't we fix that? I didn't see it in the 10-year plan for next year for pods or CFC. I mean, can't we get that fixed?
That, Chris Budzinski is looking into that, and if at any time we feel like we need to come back to the board and readjust this plan, we can do that at any point in time.
Do it now.
Well, not until we figure out what's wrong with it and have a plan to fix it.
Well, it's a million years old.
Well, we need to have information before I can present it to the board, but we'll bring it to you if and when.
Can we at least tell those poor people in that room that it will get fixed next fall?
As soon as we can. I mean, I can't say for sure. We could even get anybody in here to get it fixed in the fall. So we need to figure out what's wrong with it, what's it going to cost, what's the plan to fix it, and when can it be done.
Yeah.
You'll report back to the board what.
I was just concerned because it didn't show up on the 10-year plan. I thought next year that's pretty pressing. I mean,
It is. We just don't have the information to give you a good set of information to make a good decision, but Chris is looking into it.
will we have
Absolutely.
it by next fall?
I don't know. As quickly as we can.
You want to ask her one more time, Gene?
Well, I'm just saying, people
I
that
wish I
teach
could
in
say
there
yes, but
every
I don't
day.
want to say yes if I'm not confident it can happen by the fall. I mean, we need to gather more information.
And honestly, G, there's money in the budget to allow for these kinds of repairs that come up. And I know Dr. Owens is looking at it too.
Yep. I'll report back to the board as soon as I have information.
By next fall.
And gee, there are schools that don't have any air conditioning.
Hey, I've been in them. Been in ones that don't have any heat either.
And it's not just that room. There are other rooms
Right.
in that building that need to be looked at. So it needs to be comprehensive.
So we'll hear back from you soon.
Yep. Well, as soon as I can. Yes.
By the fall.
By next fall.
Noted.
Duly noted.
Okay, so we are looking for unless there's any other questions or comments? Okay, we are looking for a motion to approve the revised 10-year capital improvement plan as presented.
We have a motion.
We did?
We have the
Oh, sorry.
motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries.
I'd like to segue right into the next thing that we had at committee, and honestly, G, this kind of dovetails with what you said. Chris Brzezinski did give us a report on energy usage post-COVID, and it was a wonderful report. So what happened is that over the last 5 years, when we've done the capital improvements, we've increased floor space across the district almost to the tune of 68,000 square feet. But looking at the energy usage for both gas and electric, we've been able to reduce our usage by over 10%. And the report was pretty detailed. We went into it, and it was an informational thing, but it was something, a success story to share with the board. And we did have that report. The last thing we did in the Finance Committee, we talked about workers' compensation report. We had our rating decreased from 1.13 to 1.09. This is good for us because this lowers our cost and it makes us more competitive. Lynette Potoka actually had done a lot of the different work, and Professor Owens pointed her out for a lot of the effort that she put through in seeing this and carrying these workman comp forms and helping to reduce the cost of it for our district.
That's wonderful.
Thank you, Ted.
Okay, moving on to agenda item 8, human resources. We have recruitment and retention with that.
Beth?
Good evening. Would you like me to talk about the agenda item?
They want to hear from you.
Okay.
I think so.
All right, so we recently conducted a market analysis for the non-certified staff with our local market, meaning our neighboring school districts, which would be DC Everest, Marshfield, Wausau, Wisconsin Rapids, and Mosinee. And the results of that analysis revealed that the market is indicating that we're 60 cents below the average for the level 3 of the classroom support schedule, and we're 40 cents below the market on the level 4 of the food service compensation plan. So the recommendation would be to increase those two levels by 60 cents and 40 cents respectively. And then if we were to do that for the classroom support schedule, the current entry rate for that is $15.01. The 60-cent increase would bring the entry rate to $15.92 with the new salary schedule for 24-25. The current starting rate for level 4 of the food service schedule is at $14.60. Increasing that by 40 cents would bring the new entry rate for the 24-25 schedule to $15.30. So we're asking to do this at this point because we will be recruiting for these positions all summer long. In addition to that, we are currently putting in data entry numbers for our increase, the 4.12% increase, and so if we can approve this now, we won't have to do it 2 times. The total cost for that is $38,348 from the general fund and $8,194 from the food service fund.
Just a comment, then a thought, but I'm sure your data is pretty much on, and I know preliminary, just from what I know, I think those numbers are probably pretty accurate in terms of the market value of those workers. But you know, I think the market's wrong. I tell you that much in terms of what the value that these people bring to us, and it's unfortunate. And I'm not blaming anybody. I just think it's a matter of fact that these people have extremely difficult jobs, extremely stressful jobs, extremely important jobs, and yet from a market point of view, I understand where they're at. I just think it's wrong. And I know that we can't unilaterally just do something on our own necessarily, but I hope that we all wake up and we're starting to pay these people what they deserve. I'm hesitant to support passing this now because what I'm afraid is going to happen, and we've talked about this briefly, is what I'm afraid is going to happen is that we're going to pass it so that we go from here to kind of the mid-range, and the others give their increases, and then we drop down again. And I know you have to post, but I'm wondering if you can post a range of where we think it's going to be, and we wait until we see where our local school districts, where they come about, because I don't want to be on the bottom when that's already the bottom of those positions. I'd rather have us hold off in terms of the exact number that we're going to put forth until we know what our comparables have done, because I don't want us to see us pass something now and say, okay, we did our due diligence, now we're kind of, and then find out by the time the year starts that we're actually lower towards the bottom again. That's my only thought, and I know that I know the way the world is, that those particular positions aren't paid in what we think they deserve. There's lots of positions like that in the world, but this is one of them that's near and dear to my heart and people in this room as well. So anyway, that's my request, is that we hold off the exact number of the increase until we know where we're at with the comparables after they have approved their contracts. Because right now, I know a lot of them haven't moved yet.
So we do know that Wisconsin Rapids, who is the highest paying district for these positions,
They're at
is
17, I believe. Is that right?
I was going
18.
to ask that question.
What?
18.
18, okay.
Or which ones?
They're at, I want to say, for the classroom support, but Wisconsin Rapids also only has one rate, so they don't have a range. This is their flat rate. So they are issuing a 4% increase, which is, a bit less than what we're providing. And DC Everest is going to issue a 4.12% increase. So we don't have the numbers from Wausau, which is a lower paying district, and Marshfield.
So their increase at Rapids would be 72 cents. And our top is our top near 18?
Our top.
Top.
So for the classroom support, the top would be, with this increase, 21.23.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
And then for the food service, with this increase, the top would be 20.26.
Okay.
And how
So
long do you have to
again,
be
Wisconsin Rapids just has one flat rate.
How long do you have to be here to get that 21, 23?
There's 20 steps.
So you have to be here 20 years to get it.
Not necessarily.
You
They
explain
might
that.
come with experience, and
come in
so
at
we would
step 10.
place them at the step closest to their years of experience.
But potentially up to 20 years, though.
If they start at the entry level.
20 years to make $20. When you can work at.
I know.
Can I ask what the starting?
Yeah, so
wages.
Rapids for the food service is at 17.53.
Starting.
They're high.
What
But
are
there's
we?
one, that's the one rate. They have no range.
What are we starting for class support?
For classroom support, we are sorry, my print is really small on this. We are at 1501.
And that's regular ed. Special ed gets what?
Special
bit
ed, we just adjusted that group in January. And so the special ed group. Bear with me here. Why isn't? Why am I not seeing special ed on here? Well, I can tell you what their new salary schedule amount is.
I just have it noted that it's not enough for the nonsense they put up with.
1735
And the food service starting?
Pretty well sums it
for
up.
the new, with the adjustment,
Yeah.
would be 1530.
Yeah. I know, I mean, you keep us up to date, and it's wonderful that you're doing the market analysis. 'Cause I don't know that we did that a long time ago, but it's wonderful. But my feeling, I think Dennis alluded to this, is our market really other schools, or is it society in general? I mean, I drive by my favorite place, Panda Express.
Express, yeah.
They're, they're hiring $18 an hour.
Yep.
So I think it's all, but I think it's important to recognize that we provide benefits.
Yes.
We provide health
That is-
insurance.
Good point.
We provide state retirement. I mean.
403B match?
What?
So,
Payout?
401k
403B
match.
match?
We provide many benefits, resources that are private sector, like
think it's-
straight on competition. And I guess, Beth is providing a recommendation to us. I think it's important that we are able to post what we're going to pay people. I think with these jobs, it's important that we're posting, this is what we are paying, and this is what our benefit package is.
And also for those employees to know, our current employees to know, if they're considering leaving, what our pay is going to be.
Correct.
And we can adjust
First
at
pay.
any time.
Correct. And which is what we're
Right,
talking about tonight, based on what the market is.
right now.
But this is the time to be recruiting these people to make sure that we are fully staffed by the fall
And we currently have 17 non-certified positions
available.
that we're trying to fill.
Okay.
Jim?
Your analysis, is that, the standard, it seems to be only compared to the big schools in the area? Are you, because in a job like that, it's not difficult for someone to drive over to Rosholt or Auburndale or Mosinee. Are you comparing to those schools too, or are they left out of this?
I think we're more competitive.
We haven't used them. Mosinee we have used. At times we've used Merrill, but people aren't usually going to drive that far.
But like Almond,
positions.
Plainfield,
Roswell is.
Amherst, these are not long drives for people living here.
Mm-hmm.
Are we competitive with those markets? Just saying.
Yeah.
Good point.
Just to
Because that
make
is a direct
comment.
comparison.
I know that we have those benefits for those employees, but we have those benefits for all employees. So when I look at their pay in accordance to what they do, I think that they're grossly underpaid. And I know, first of all, I give you the administration credit that you added the 4%, then you looked at it and said, even with the 4%, we're a little low, and this will get us to at least where we're in the range. But I would want to know that we're going to bring it back and look at it after all the other increases are in, so we can look again, because I don't want to be on the bottom for the position which is already universally underpaid. I don't think we want to be on the bottom for that, because if you're in the classroom, if you are in a building and you see kids and you see these aides and what they're doing, I think you'd be embarrassed by what we pay them. And I'm not saying we have to shoot for the moon. I'm just saying, let's make sure that we're not on the bottom. If we're going to pass it tonight so that you can go ahead and do your job, then I want it assured that we're going to bring it back after all the numbers are in and say, okay, this is now we're not where we want to be. Let's make another adjustment then. That's why I'd like to at least make sure that we have secured.
Sure. And we will do that because there are some positions in this study that were fairly close, and I held off to see what the increases would be with the other districts. So there may be another group or two that we'll need to bring forward, and certainly I can update you on this group as well.
And you said 38,000 was coming out of the general fund?
38, yes.
38,348.
So when the recommendation for this is made, whoever makes that, I'd like to make sure that you have the addendum say, and we will be bringing this back for further review after, at some point where Beth feels it's appropriate.
Sure.
I remember way back, I think, one of my first years when Craig was a superintendent, he made a comment that if we're looking at the field, seeing what they're paying, and then, so we adjust, but next year, the field is up here, and we're adjusting it here, so we're constantly behind. Are you saying, and I just heard somebody mention 4%, are you saying you anticipate that by adding 4% to where they are now?
Right. So I think with just Rapids and DC Everest information, we'll be okay with this group. But I don't know what Marshfield might come in at. And then if you want me to consider these other districts, we certainly can. I fear that they might be lower, and so that they'll
think
bring
there's
that
no
average
fear.
down.
I would support what Jim said. After Act 10, all of a sudden, wages shuffled, and we weren't higher than a lot of the small districts. I don't know what it is now.
Yeah, well, we can look at that.
I just want to underline that Beth is doing this. I mean, she was back to us a couple months ago looking for an increase. So, I mean, our HR department, I think, has been incredibly proactive with this in bringing forward requests to us for our non-contract employees. And I have no doubt that she will continue to do that.
Absolutely.
And continue to be, you know, taking a look all the time at, because, you know, the worst thing in the world for HR is when you don't have a seat filled.
Right.
For staff, especially EA, is, you know, for our food service, for our bus drivers. I mean, it's, you know, and I just really appreciate all the work that your staff is doing to keep bringing this updated information to us. You know, but ultimately, it's, you know, is it once a year? Is it twice a year? I mean, it's really
I
trying
think-
to work within our budget and make sure we are recruiting where we need to be recruiting now for the staff.
And it's not only the increases that they're going to give this year, but they may make adjustments throughout the year. And
Sure.
Beth does a nice job of monitoring that as well.
Right.
And if necessary, we'll bring it back.
And I think that what I'm hearing board members say is, we just want to ensure, to G's point, are we lagging or are we leading? And we recognize that year over year, especially with these EA positions, I mean, it's a different job in that classroom. And so I feel like for those that spoken up, we want to ensure that we're leading if possible. And to Meg's point, we know that you're looking at the market analysis, and will keep us posted and apprised of that. So
I will.
But it was also factual that we have a 25% turnover in this position.
The EAs.
So you know, again, and I'm not disagreeing with anything you're saying there in terms, I'm not questioning Beth at all.
Right.
I'm just saying, as a board member, this is an area where I think we should be
leading.
we should be leading, we should be pressing, and we're giving feedback to our administration to say, this is really important. It's so important, in fact, after all the numbers are in, we want you to look at it again, and if we are not in that same range where you think we're going to be now, then we'd like to look at it again. That's all I'm asking.
I would recommend that we support Beth's recommendation so that we can get those positions posted and so that people know what they're going to be paid for next year.
Okay, so any other discussion? If not, we're looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion. I make a motion that we support Beth's recommendation so that we know what these individuals are going to be paid next year, and also that once Beth feels all the numbers are in, that she comes back and reports to us in terms of where we're at.
Second.
Who's?
That's Barb.
Barb, okay, motion made by Dennis, second by Barb, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you,
Beth.
Beth.
Can we-
Yes. How are we doing with filling positions right now, Beth?
With our teaching staff, we're doing well. As always, we could use more special ed applicants.
And we're still offering.
Got 2 open positions right now.
We are offering
Stipend.
some
Yes.
incentives
Yes.
for that.
For the hard-to-fill positions, yes.
Oh, we are. I didn't know
We offer a
that.
$5,000 bonus.
And Beth,
Given immediately or after a year or
It's
something?
over 3 years. They get
Really?
they get
Oh, I didn't know.
$2,500 the first year, and then the $1,250 the second and
Is
third
that
year.
posted and known? So like on the posting on weekend, is that?
For that specific position, it should be the hard-to-fill
I
positions.
just know that other positions say like, right, this teacher, $5,000 bonus or whatever. It's posted right on weekend with that bonus noted. So I
It
didn't know
should
if
be
that
on the
was-
posting.
Okay.
So for those positions.
For those,
yeah.
right, for those specific ones, right.
and Beth, for that 25% turnover for these EA positions, is that typical? Are we seeing it trending upward?
Typical.
Okay, so it's not moving up, it's just,
The 25% also includes our special ed EAs, and that's probably the higher turnover than the regular ed EA positions.
okay.
Thank you,
Thank-
Beth.
Great,
Thank
okay,
you.
thanks, Beth.
Thanks for all
Thank
you do,
you.
Beth.
Okay, moving on to agenda item 9, educational services. We have the Educational Services Committee report with G.
Okay, we had, Chris is getting ready for a presentation that he's making now that he didn't make at Ed Service. Right?
Correct.
Yeah,
Yes,
so-
I did not make that.
So I'm gonna go over the couple things that we did do. We had Brent Kostomsky give us a overview of the career and technical education program here in the district, and he gave us a lot of numbers and everything. And the thing I was impressed by was that it was trending up by a lot this last year. We have 73 people involved in that. And I, to your question, Alex asked a question compared to Rosholt, where you had, was it like a third of the students involved? And was it a third?
It was 14 out of,
70 or something?
well,
Like 20%, I think
because
it
it's a
was.
junior and senior, so
Yeah.
it's 14 out of 70.
So our percentage is a lot lower, but Brent made I thought a pretty good remark, is like, we're getting a lot of people. If you want more, you better, I think his idea was, well, you better hire more people, because to take care of it. Well, anyway, he made that presentation. I mean, it's pretty healthy and it's growing fast, which is really good. Then we had at-risk programming overview that Jeff led, and we looked at the 5 areas where we're helping with at-risk kids. One was summer school, the STEP program, the Challenge Academy, Transition to Success, otherwise known as TTS, and the Fernandez Center. And Danielle gave a presentation on that. And, we're working hard to help the kids who need the help. So I thought that was excellent.
Great.
Chris?
Thank you,
So
G.
If I
Oh,
could,
go ahead,
just add one thing, so one of the things Brent brought up is that the state provides, what is it, 6.5 million of
flat rate.
funding.
Oh, yeah,
It's a
that's right.
flat rate
Yeah.
for the apprenticeship program. And what's happening statewide is that there are more schools getting involved, and there are more students in the schools becoming apprentices. And the way the program was designed was $1,000 per student, but it's a flat amount of money. And so if there's a huge, larger number of students, then the students are going to receive less. And so I did reach out, and I encourage all of you, I reached out to Senator Teston's office and
Andy
Katrina
Tobias.
Shanklin's office with respect to this. My understanding from Katrina's office is that the governor had tried to increase it to like 8.3 million or 8.5 million, but it didn't make it through joint finance. So there is no increase in the current budget, and the budget's set, so there's no more money that will move forward for this year. But there's future. So I'm just encouraging other board members to reach out to both Katrina's office and Pat's office if you would like to ask them to take a look at our state providing some additional funding into this pool of money. Because to me, frankly, it's not a lot of money. When you look at the state budget, it could probably be doubled with not a lot of impact on our state budget, and it would support all those kids who are in those apprenticeship programs.
Thanks, Meg.
Thanks, Meg. All right. And G is correct when he says that this presentation did not go through Educational Services first, and that was really by the request of the board, that at the conclusion of the academic year that we would bring forward our levels of academic performance in terms of forward pre-ACT and ACT, as well as our universal screening data for the areas of English language arts and math. I have a lot of information here, so if I could ask that you hold your questions until the presentation concludes and I can get those answered for you. I want to just begin by sharing first the data that we have available to us, which is the percentage of students that we have scoring advanced or proficient on the forward exam, pre-ACT, and ACT. All of those statistics are included here in the metrics that I've shared. We started last year by beginning to look at 2014. 2014 was the year when Badger exam existed, and the transition to forward exam happened in 2015-16. There was no magic to selecting 2014. It just felt like a logical starting point because it was the year prior to beginning the new assessment. So we'll continue to add to this trend as we analyze data, and next year we'll be looking at a 10-year trend, an 11-year trend, a 12-year trend. And I think it also warrants mentioning here, before we talk about particularly forward exam, pre-ACT, and ACT levels of performance, there have been changes in cut scores since 2014. So to be considered proficient or advanced has changed since 2014. In other words, those performance bands have increased. So to be proficient in 2014 is not the same as it is to be proficient in 2023. Students just completed these assessments in the spring of this year, so we're looking forward to continued growth. What we see here is the percentage of students that scored proficient or advanced in the column under 2023. And to the column on the far right, what you see is the percent loss or gain from 2014 to 2023. The one thing that I don't want to lose sight of as we look at this data is, what does that look like from the year prior, right? You've heard Jeff and I come forward and talk a lot about the work that we're doing through continuous improvement planning, through teacher evaluation, through professional development. So what is the return on investment for those efforts? And I want to keep a pulse on that, because even though we can look at those performance levels and say it's not good enough yet, I am pleased to see that we're trending in the right direction for most of those federally identified groups that we report out on the school accountability report card. The exception of 2 or more races is the one area that continues to be an area of concern. It also mirrors some of the information that Jenny and I have been spending a considerable amount of time talking about in terms of strategizing and how we address that. But we're talking about thousands of students that complete an assessment. So even incremental growth is positive, right? We don't expect to see 10%, 20% increases when we're talking about aggregate groups of 4,000 kids, almost 5,000 kids. We just don't expect to see that. But I am pleased to see what we're seeing here in terms of growth percentages for ELA. In the area of math, we see also primarily growth, with the exception of students who are categorized as Black or students who are categorized as socioeconomically disadvantaged. I have some data later in the presentation to indicate what's happening in terms of enrollment within those student groups, because that's another important factor for us to consider. When we look at marginalized populations or student populations that perhaps have been longitudinally underperforming, what's happening within those groups? Are they getting bigger? Are they getting smaller? And as those groups become a more significant part of our majority, we have to be more intentional about ensuring we're meeting the learning needs of those populations. And we have some evidence here to indicate that not quite, but it's getting better, right? So pleased to see what I see here in the area of math as well. I wanted to take a look at what does that trend look like in terms of overall levels of performance. I went back as far as I could in terms of when the state started creating a state accountability report card and looked at what our overall level of performance looked like as a full district. In 16-17, we saw that we were categorized as exceeding expectations with an overall accountability score of 74.7. I want to point out one thing here for community members that might be joining this conversation. 74.7, 72.1, 72.0 does not demonstrate the percentage of students that were scoring proficient on the assessments, right? There are a number of factors and variables that go into calculating that overall numeric score. So it is not a percentage. There are percentages that factor into that overall rating, but it is not the percentage of students that are scoring at or above what we would consider a proficient level in ELA or math. Just an important I think, clarification. We do see a downward trend here that continues in terms of our overall score. So we see from 66.8 down to 65.1 to most recently 63.7. So I think when Jeff and I and Corey kind of came onto the scene, we certainly recognized a sense of urgency and sort of a call for action to interrupt this pattern. And the work that we've been doing and the work that we'll continue to do, which I'll foreshadow here before the presentation concludes, certainly we certainly hope it will continue to support some of the growth that we saw in the data we just looked at. We look at those statewide or summative assessment results that obviously document the level of performance that students have when they take that assessment at one point each year. We do have some local data that gives us more frequent indications of how students are going to perform. And what we see here is this is our universal screener that's administered to all grade levels, kindergarten through 10th grade at 3 different intervals throughout the year. So fall, winter, and spring. I'm really pleased to see here that at elementary we see growth at every single grade level with the exception of kindergarten. I will point out that we have been in the process of working with our kindergarten teachers to identify where shortcomings might be within our curriculum. You all know that we're heading into the process of selecting a new K-6 ELA resource in the upcoming year. I think that's going to provide a lot of clarity for teachers in terms of an appropriately paced scope and sequence that will certainly impact these levels of performance. I do want to point out here also that though 17% loss from fall to spring is not good, it's important to note that to be proficient at fall, at winter, and at spring is not the same. So if you're scoring at proficient in the fall, you're not going to just be able to do the same level of performance by spring and be considered proficient. So the bar is raised at each assessment interval. And in kindergarten last year, from fall to spring, we saw what was closer to a 30% loss. So those 17% less is not good. It's better than 30. So we are making some progress there. In the area of math, at elementary, what we see is growth in almost every grade level with the exception of kindergarten, which is a modest loss of 2% from fall to spring, 3rd grade at 5%, and 6th grade at 2%. Those certainly are areas that as principals or leaders have identified larger losses at particular grade levels in their buildings, we're addressing as part of continuous improvement planning. I'm in the process right now of meeting with building principals to review the progress they've made on their SLOs and make revisions to their school improvement plan for the upcoming year. This is what it looks like at secondary, so 7th through 10th grade. In the area of reading, we saw a 2% loss at 7th grade. No change at 8th grade in terms of growth. 9th grade, a 1% increase, and 10th grade, a 3% loss. Right, certainly some work to do in this particular area as well, but we're pleased to see that the growth that did occur both at 8th grade and at 9th grade. In the area of math, some concerns here just in terms of lack of growth. We saw growth at only 1 grade level at 7th grade, and at all 3 other grade levels that were assessed, 8th, 9th, and 10th, we did see modest losses, 1%, 1%, 2% respectively. I did want to share here just quickly, when we talk about these populations of students and we talk about subgroups of students and how they are or are not performing, I think it's important to know what's happening with enrollment within each one of those categories. So this identifies how ethnicity is changing in the district over time. So since 2014 through 2024, you can see that white students are on the bottom in pink, and you can see that that part of the bar graph is progressively getting smaller. So our what we would consider marginalized or longitudinally underperforming populations continue to grow or get larger. So our demographic is shifting, and I would expect to see that trend continue. The two that are not captured here, which also are very much prioritized in our continuous improvement planning work, are students with disabilities and students that are considered socioeconomically disadvantaged. So I did want to capture that on this slide as we think about enrollment from 2015 through 2024. What we can see is occurring with students who are considered socioeconomically disadvantaged, sort of that lighter green or turquoise colored line along the top of the graph. We see non-economically disadvantaged kind of trending downward. and economically disadvantaged students, which is the green line down below, trending in an upward direction. So as our population shifts, those populations continue to shift as well. And that's just something that's critical for us to be aware of. When we talk about those achievement gaps, this is not new language, this is not new vocabulary, right? We've been talking about achievement gaps in the state of Wisconsin for a long time. I just want to share a couple of slides here which really highlight that what we're experiencing here locally is not unique to Stevens Point, right? These are challenges that districts across the state are facing. And when we talk about students that have large gap, or we talk about districts that have large gaps between students who are considered socioeconomically disadvantaged and not, Wisconsin ranks among the highest. But again, this is not local to Stevens Point. This represents every district in our state. So our challenges are not unique, but I think that's important to share as part of this discussion. Same with when we compare students with disabilities and students without disabilities. We see students without disabilities significantly outperforming students that are identified with disabilities. And again, this is data that indicates what's occurring across the state. Same when we look at the differences in performance levels of the students that are Black compared to students that are white. We see our white students outperforming Black students significantly across the state. There are a host of reasons that folks cite for the gap. Why does the gap exist? Why is it there? Students don't care. There's a narrative that indicates that there's lack of parental involvement or support, the increase in behavior concerns, the teacher the year before, they have a disability, they're English language learners, COVID. Many of those examples or reasons for why the gap exists here in Stevens Point have also been shared with me. And some of them may be true, but at the end of the day, the work is the same, right? We still have to interrupt the pattern of performance, even if all of these factors have indeed impacted our levels of performance for the last 9 years. The current state of school reform makes this work even more challenging. So we talk about addressing achievement gaps. This is complex work. This is difficult work because if there were a simple fix, we would have done it a long time ago. There isn't an easy answer, and it's difficult to draw a parallel line directly between this input and that outcome. Because we did this, this happened, because there are lots of factors that contribute to student performance. In some instances in the educational world, not unique to Stevens Point again, we have fundamentalists who really would like to hang on to how we've always done things. And I think what our systems need is to be incredibly responsive and incredibly nimble in a way that perhaps we've never been asked to do before in the past. And our work with continuous improvement planning really provides us with an avenue and a pathway to be able to do that almost on a monthly basis and certainly on a yearly basis. I want to just reference here some work to ground the board ground the community in terms of what Jeff and I have really leveraged with our administrative team to say, what is it that perhaps we've not been doing? Because we've been working on revising our schedules. We've been working on implementing new curricular resources. We continue to do that work, but I still believe there's more. There's something we've not been doing. There was a study that was done by TNTP. It's the National Teaching Project. It was completed in 2018. A large scale. Thank you. Oh, that's so nice of you, Sarah.
She's like a water angel.
I know, right?
We need one of those in our lives, right?
It is. I guess I'm just talking a lot. I was going to say it's really dry in here, but no, it's not it. I'm just talking.
Dry. My eyes are dry.
I'm just talking a lot. We've taken a look and we've really leveraged some, what I would say, profound findings that came out of this research study. I think what differentiates this research study from maybe other educational research studies that have been done is the close examination both of instruction, student work, and grades that were provided. So there was a comprehensive analysis of not only the instruction that occurred in the classroom, but also the work that students produced, the lessons that were presented, the assignments that students were expected to complete, and the grades that they received on them. Oftentimes, we look at research studies that just look at the instruction or just look at the grades that kids get. So they really did a nice job sort of peeling back the layers of what factors had the largest influence on changing the academic trajectory for students. And we've leveraged this research a lot with our administrative team. So there are 4 key resources that benefit all students. And you can see on the far right of each of these that high expectations for students has had the most significant impact on changing the academic trajectory for students. In other words, when teachers feel like their teachers think they can, that they're not giving up on them, that they're capable, is when we see students make the largest percentages of growth over a 1-year period of time. And so the system doesn't necessarily send a message to teachers or educators that their mindset matters nearly as much as the material they teach or the practices they employ in their classrooms. In many ways, we've led teachers to believe that our levels of performance are low because you don't have the right resource. Our levels of performance are low because you don't have enough time to teach your content. Our levels of performance are low because we don't have the right assessments, right? And all of those things matter. But what our research and what current research and evolving research has identified is that mindsets matter more. Mindsets matter most. When we can create environments and experiences for kids that send a message every day, all day, you're capable, you belong here, I'm not giving up on you, kids achieve at higher levels, right? And that's the work that we're really trying to do. And I realize as I stand here and say it, it sounds so simple. It's so hard, right? Because to be intentional all day long with all of the other distractions that happen in a classroom, what does that look like? What does that sound like? Peeling back and dissecting that layer of instruction is incredibly difficult work. And I can say from the last 2 years that I've been in this district, I'm incredibly proud of the practitioners that we have in classrooms because they're willing to do it and they're doing it. And we have some preliminary data to indicate that we're trending in the right direction. So though this is not a data presentation that's going to send us all out of the room cheering and spinning cartwheels because we're not where we want to be and not where we need to be, we are trending in the right direction and we are making progress. And I can tell you with 100% certainty that we have practitioners in classrooms who are doing the hard work. They're doing the heavy lifting. And I think that's an important message to hear. This truth slide is just something that I feel is really relevant when we ground ourselves in continuing the work that is difficult and is so demanding of our time. We exist to serve all children, and some children right now are not making enough progress, right? They're making some, but they're not making enough. We have students who are being and have been underserved. I think by naming these inequities here, and I give a lot of credit to this board for wanting to have this kind of data discussion openly as part of a public forum, because it is a powerful testament to your commitment to supporting us in changing this trajectory. By naming these gaps, or by naming this gap, we take on a responsibility for our own learning and the improvement that's required. So when we look here at how does this translate into what's next, we're looking for, again, to stay in alignment with those goals that were established as part of our strategic plan back in 2022, continuing to see those 3% increases in both ELA and math, which means we would increase from 41.8 in 2023. I want to point out here that that was the goal. We have not met that, so we are below 41.8. But if we had trended a 3% increase from 2022 to 2023, we would have been at 41.8. We would move to 44.8 in 2024, and we'd be at 47.8 in 2025. We're slightly below that. So as we move from 2023 to 2024, we've got more than 3% to make up. So we have to make not just expected growth or expected progress. We really need to be looking at how do we make accelerated progress at this point in time. We're also slightly below what we forecasted in terms of a 3% increase for this year in the area of math. But those are our goals, and that is some of the work that Jeff and I continue to champion and shepherd with our administrative team as part of continuous improvement planning. And that concludes the data presentation, but I'd be happy to entertain questions that anyone might have.
Jim?
At the beginning, you said how that 2014 data, they changed. And so I guess it's hard to compare to that then. My understanding too is that they are going to change the reporting again next year. So if they're going to change the nomenclature of the categories and possibly change parameters, how are we going to compare? Or is this different than what the state's sending us?
It will create another layer of, I think, challenge. Just At this point in time, I am not aware of an intent to change performance bands, in other words, the rank, but they will be changing the language. So instead of below basic, basic, proficient, or advanced, it will be, I think, developing,
Right.
meeting, approaching, and advanced. Thank you.
And if you look at the report card, though, you look, because there were two different scores. One was the overall, which included a bunch of non-academic things, and then the academic score.
And these are academic scores,
Okay.
right?
But the other one was not, right?
Right.
That one included all of the other,
Correct. The overall district report card
Okay.
score included everything.
all right.
Anybody else?
G?
Questions?
Nobody else has anything? I have some things.
Sure.
This is a sobering report. Thanks for doing this. It was hard to put that stuff on the screen. Because, I've been on the board 4 years. It makes me feel like a colossal failure to look at those numbers. But it's not new to say that the teacher is the most important thing. I remember data from years ago that said the best indicator of student success is a motivated, well-trained teacher in the classroom. So we spend money on programs, but it's not the programs, it's the person in the classroom. So I see like we're starting a new phonics program and stuff like that. But it's not the program, it's the person who's going to teach it. So we spend a lot of time on professional development. And my personal feeling is we should spend more time on professional development, less time buying programs. And I think we talked about this in your office. It's the teacher, not the programs. And we've got great teachers. But I have talked to teachers who will say I spend 70% of my time getting students ready to learn and 30% teaching, because there's just so much they have to deal with. So my question would be is, what do we do to lessen the 70%, increase the 30%? And I'm sure everybody asks that question.
Well,
Go ahead.
and I think, G, one thing that we're doing, I think collectively as a team, I think the board's decision to support the implementation of Character Strong as a universal social emotional learning curriculum last month is a significant step toward addressing some of the time that's spent managing the 70%. I also think, we can look at our levels of performance, particularly on universal screening data, to say that we're lower in ELA, we're higher in math, at least at the elementary level. And we do have standards-aligned curricular resources available in the area of math that are universal across all of our 9 elementary schools. In other words, if I'm a student at McKinley and I'm a third grader, I'm getting the same thing that they're getting at Washington, that they're getting at MacDill, that they're getting at Roosevelt. And we do not have that right now in ELA. So you're right, and I think we have incredible teachers. I think the one thing that teachers have really struggled with on the ELA side, we talk about a program not being the answer. But I do think that with all of the best intentions, teachers just don't have time to sort through the level of rigor that needs to be presented at kindergarten, at first grade, at second grade, in terms of reading in particular. So I do believe that the purchase of a standards-aligned curricular resource is going to significantly change the data that we're looking at in the next 2 to 5 years.
And that's feedback that I've heard from teachers. That has been a big gap. Dennis?
I just want to thank you. I think it's I think if you give a very honest overview, a very transparent overview of where we're at with our performance levels. And I think the first step in improvement is recognizing that you're not where you want to be. And I think that you and the administrative team has certainly done that. I know the board feels the same way. And I have the full confidence you and your team will put together the necessary alterations so that we are going where we want to be. But I'm glad that we're not hiding this under a rock and saying everything's great and it's just just the way it is, and because it's not. And when you recognize that, then you can just honestly look, so what do we do to improve? And if that doesn't work, you try something else. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I looking through at this data, recognizing that you and Corey and Jeff, you guys are a newly formed leadership team. So when you look at the data from 22 and where we are today, to your point, there are good strides that we've made, and I know that you guys have been hyper-focused on this. So thank you for that, and thank you for being transparent. And I think that's a way to hold everyone accountable, right?
Including ourselves, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Regarding what's next, so I see that you have the increase that you want to make. How? So what are we doing different this next upcoming year that we're not done, or what will we continue to do so that we can make those strides?
And some of it really is, Jen, grounded in the work around analyzing that research that continues to evolve around the impact that High Expectations has on students. So High Expectations for students, we've really been guiding principals in terms of analyzing instruction. So we've provided them with video footage that comes from classrooms that allows them to be able to, with teams of teachers, analyze what are teachers doing or not doing during these videos that are communicating high expectations to students, so that we can replicate that and make that a consistent part of our daily practice. I think the other piece is, the work at elementary in particular around letters training for all of our K-3 staff will be significant in the upcoming year. So providing them with that really, really comprehensive understanding of foundational literacy skills. That's a significant component of the work at elementary. At secondary, that continued work around PLCs and doing the standards alignment work to ensure that we're embedding that level of rigor. So those really are, and I think, that's not necessarily brand new, but
Right.
some of it is continuing really what we would identify as critical work that just hasn't been completed yet.
Right. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Meg?
So, I'm not gonna go back to the COVID, like COVID's at fault for all this. I'm just going to the, I'm just going to the COVID to say that I think it's where we all became aware that schools were feeding kids, providing social emotional support for kids, providing adult mentorship for kids, providing support for families within this community in a way that was just stark and evident. And I just think it's really important to note that our staff continue to work really hard, but the challenges that families and kids are facing, whether it's social media, whether it's the increasing socioeconomic pressures on families, that's what shows up in our classrooms every day. And so to the extent that we can continue as a board, which I think we've been trying to do, to figure out how to support kids and families in all of those ways, and really allow our teachers to focus on teaching. And focus on that area is a direction we need to continue to I guess have for us, because teachers are struggling in classrooms and kids are struggling in classrooms, and it impacts everybody's learning, and it's showing up in our data, and we're not unique. I mean, districts around the state, around the country are struggling with it. So we got to support our teachers by taking some of those underlying responsibilities and putting them in the hands of professionals that can help.
So Alex, and then I saw G, and then I saw Barb.
I've already talked.
Okay, so Alex?
I have just some follow-up qualifications, if
Sure.
when we compare FastBridge data, which is our universal screener 4-point, how does that compare to the state? Because when I look here, I'm looking at FastBridge, the first page of FastBridge, and it says that we have, 52% proficient in reading, but then the state test tells us that we're 37%. This is a discrepancy of a lot. I don't math, but it's a lot. It's 15%, I think.
Agreed.
So why this large gap between our universal? Because our universal looks like we're sitting,
Okay.
Not pretty, but
Right.
okay. But then when we look at our state testing, we're at 37% or
38.4. Yeah.
38.4, I will take the qualification. Thank you. So 38.4, so, 14%. But why such a discrepancy? And is this a true, valid assessment when we're comparing it to the state? Does that make sense?
So in terms of how does our FastBridge or universal screening data compare to the state, that I can't answer because they don't have access to universal screeners that are administered in districts across the state. So they might be using a different screener. They might be using MAP. They might be using AimsWeb. They might be using Dibbles.
Right.
So I don't have that data available, but I can tell you that there is no real expectation to see similar levels of performance on what is a screening assessment versus what is a summative assessment. So a summative assessment, like we see for forward exam, pre-ACT and ACT, is intended to culminate in learning that's occurred over a large period of years, right? So for third graders that take ELA and math for the first time on the forward, we're assessing what they've learned since the time they were enrolled in kindergarten, right? Where a universal screener is really intended to just identify small gaps in learning that have occurred over the period of a few months within a year. So in other words, how is our instruction, how effective is our instruction? So the correlation rate between FastBridge and forward is not high. Right? So we would not expect that because we have 75% of kids scoring above the cut score or above proficiency on FastBridge, that we would see 70% of kids scoring advanced or proficient on the forward exam. The purpose of the assessment is just very different, right? One is summative, one is a screener. It's a good question, though.
On our like pre-ACT, ACT, the forward,
Yep.
Can we drill down and say we are lacking in X, and then when we are looking at our FastBridge data saying, well, according to our FastBridge data, it doesn't say that we're lacking in X, so we have a problem someplace, there's a discrepancy. Is there a way that we used to be able to drill down even to the question. I don't know if that's available anymore, but
No.
we used to be able to. And that was really quite handy. So how can we have,
More specific.
more specificity
To find correlation.
to find
between
correlation between the two?
And in that regard, Alex, we do see correlation. So when we look at, say, our forward exam results for third grade reading, we do see lower levels of performance in the areas of phonics and decoding, right? And if we look at, say, FastBridge screening data for early reading in K1 or for A reading in grades 2 and 3, we would see very similar levels of skill deficiency. So from my perspective, it again speaks to the level of rigor that we are or are not exposing students to on a consistent and daily basis. So that again speaks to what are the curricular resources that teachers have available to them so that we're consistently addressing those. Because at this point in time, yes, we have the ability to drill down and do some item analysis to be able to determine like what areas or strands of learning. Is it algebraic thinking? Is it geometry? Is it phonics? Is it comprehension? Is it vocabulary? Like what areas are students performing more poorly in? We have the ability to do that now, but particularly on the reading side, I don't have the ability to say we need to shore up our curricular resource for that because they're not all using the same thing and they're not all using it at the same point in the year. So that's how curriculum gets designed and that's how curriculum gets improved, right? We all have something universally, we live it, and we exhaust every single element of what's available within that resource, and then we identify where the skill deficiencies are, and then we enhance it by adding or supplementing, right? We're at that kind of square one in terms of we just all need to get on the same page and be using the same thing. And then when we do that drill down and item analysis, then we can beef up our curriculum to be able to say we can more effectively address this. So systemically, we're not seeing those low levels of performance across the board.
And then one more question. So looking at the high school, 7 through 10, we're seeing modest growth to not. Is that, when we're looking at grades, A, B, C, D, F, is that accurate with, because if we are not growing, so the purpose of teaching, algebra, that, we know little algebra to knowing a larger body of algebra, right? That's the goal.
That's the hope.
But that's the hope, right? That's why we teach. That's the goal. So, but if we aren't moving from minimal to big, does that reflect it in our grades as well? Because it's certainly reflective that our students aren't growing according to our data. Our students aren't growing, so hence our grades should also be reflecting that lack of growth, right? Because it shows maybe a struggle in the rigor portion, or an inflation of grades, or, right, this is a systemic problem, not just a SPASH problem, and it's a universal school problem, that we don't want to have kids fail, and I understand that because it, does all kinds of things. But we're also showing that we're not growing, and our students aren't growing. So our grades, in my mind, should be reflecting a lack of growth by reflecting that in grades. Is that true and accurate?
That is not true and accurate.
I doubt it.
So we have, right, and this, again, is not unique to Stephen's point, and this opens a large can of worms in terms of work that will need to be done systemically to address grading practices. And that is a really philosophical discussion once we start to peel the layers of that off. But we don't see correlation there. So we have a much higher percentage of A's and B's. And if we were to look for evidence of that in standardized assessments or universal screening, we would not see alignment, or we would not see correlation. In other words, right, we don't see the amount of growth that we would hope to see at 7th through 10th grade in ELA or in math. But we still see large percentages, in some cases upwards of 80% of students receiving A's and B's. So there is some work to be done around weight rigor, standards alignment, and grading practices. So we're going to...
It's called job stability.
Can't build, that's right. I guess this is job security. I
I'm
can't build...
not trying to bust
No,
chops either.
that's a good question. That's a
Yeah,
really
it's a
good
very
question.
good question.
I'm sorry, Barb had her hand raised.
What have we done to help parents get ready to help the kids?
And I think one thing that systemically we've been much more intentional about doing is, just like as a district, we've really decided to look at the data, own it, good, bad, or otherwise, right? We've decided also and been very intentional about doing that with parents. So in the past, I think there was a held belief of, everything's great, your child's delightful, I love having them in class, everything's wonderful. And somehow that becomes the message versus there are these skill deficiencies that are underlying that need to be addressed. So the universal screening data does serve a really critical purpose in those conversations with parents, because we're able to point our finger to they're not at their grade level in reading, they're not at their grade level in math, and here's what they're missing. And teachers are now armed with that knowledge to be able to point their finger based on the screening data and say, this is what they need to work on, and then provide examples of that. So as we grow and evolve, Barb, I think in our proficiency in that area, teachers are becoming much more comfortable with providing that education and providing those suggestions and recommendations to parents. Do I feel like we've hit that out of the park at this point? The answer is no. But I think there is a level of awareness, and I do think that teachers are doing the work of sharing those recommendations with parents much more consistently than they have in the past.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Will, sorry.
Well, you have
I was trying to...
I'm just curious, what can we as a board do to make this better? Because this is problematic. So,
Yeah, I think, Will, in terms of the board work, I think there is, support for the work you're doing here. I think it's, acknowledging the data. I think supporting the work that's going to make these results improve. So as we make our way through the vetting process in the upcoming year, asking the hard questions, ensuring that the decisions we're making really are going to impact the groups that continue to underperform. I think it's continuing to talk about the data. I think when teachers come to you, with concerns, sharing those with myself, sharing those with Corey, sharing those with Jeff, with Jenny, so that we can provide the appropriate level of support. I think that's all work that the board can be doing to sort of continue to move us in the right direction.
thank you.
Yeah.
Dennis.
I just wanted to reinforce something that Meg said that I thought was pretty profound. Every day, kids come into classrooms, and these students reflect the challenges of society. And these kids come from homes where there's alcoholism, drug abuse, poverty, hunger, mental illness, and all other kinds of maladies and challenges. And the teacher has to deal with that. And then during the process, they say, oh, by the way, you have to teach math,
Make these
science,
scores
and
better.
everything else.
Right.
So, I believe scores are really important. And I think it's important what we're doing, but more important, really, in some ways, is how we're dealing with those issues for those young people and how we're getting them through those times, because so many of our young people, and way too many, they've learned the reading, writing, and arithmetic, but unfortunately, they haven't learned some of those other things, and they have issues that lead to suicide and lead to significant mental health issues. And as much as we can do in our schools by our teachers who are doing it, certainly that's really important. So I'm not saying let's not forget about this. I'm just saying what you said is absolutely true. When we look at, it'd be great, teachers, some people say, well, why don't you just teach math? Teachers would love just to teach math, because that means all the other issues aren't there. But unfortunately, their plates are full of things that many of us can't even fathom. That's challenging.
It's about
Thank you.
balance. Yeah.
Chris, as we look at like neighboring districts, are there any that are significantly outperforming us? Because if so, I'm just wondering what type of partnership or learning can we gather from them to help implement here?
So there are districts that are, and I think, we have, if we were to do a comparative analysis, just say of our Valley Five, since we typically use those as sort of our comparative group, the performance is mixed. So we have elementaries and junior highs that are performing at a higher level than some of our neighboring peers. We do have, our senior high school is performing among the lowest of our neighboring peers. So we're very aware of that, and certainly doing the work to interrupt that pattern that we've seen kind of occurring over the last 5 years. And in terms of leveraging and kind of learning from them, I think certainly as we head into selecting a K-6 resource for the upcoming year, which is a large undertaking for a district our size, we will absolutely be looking at surrounding districts in terms of what they're learning and beyond, right? We have districts in the state that are really high performing. Like if we look at their levels of proficiency, they are 20%, 30% above where we are. So if we look at districts like, Elmbrook, and we look at districts like Whitefish Bay, and, someone can say it's not a fair comparison because their demographic is so dramatically different, but there is something to be learned there, right? And if that scope and sequence really is yielding those kind of results, then it warrants pausing long enough to be able to look there. So I can appreciate the need to look at our neighboring districts, but I also think I think we owe it to our stakeholders to even look more broadly than that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
G?
Data's wonderful. It's useful and everything like that. But I tend to, for me, I look at what I see personally, anecdotal information. And it's important. I've been in a lot of classrooms, and I will tell you that teachers are stressed if they're the only adult in that classroom and they've got kids all over the place. I don't know how they come back the next day. And many of you have seen this, and I've seen it. And say a teacher, say a special ed teacher comes in and pulls a couple kids out, and the whole classroom changes. All of a sudden, you spent 90% of your time working with a couple kids, which you need to do and they need it. When they leave, all of a sudden, everything is just moving along. So what I've seen is that other adults in the classroom change everything dramatically. So we talk about teachers' aides, things like that. Volunteers. I've been in classrooms where when our own district, kindergarten teacher had volunteers, parent volunteers coming in several, different times of the day, and they had jobs. She organized this so she could keep on top of things, so you could have time to deal with kids who need more of your time. So if we're talking about what to do, and I know we're already doing things. It's not like you just found this out.
Right.
I think it would be helpful if, as people see this data and we're walking around and people say, well, what are you doing about it? Well, I'd like to be able to say all the things we're doing about it. If we could see that, because I know we have these things, and I can't rattle them off the top of my head. If you guys could just say, these are our answers, these are what they're not our answers, these are what we're doing to try to make this situation better. But I would also say that more adults in the classroom is a huge, huge difference, and you know this. Teachers' aides are invaluable, but we were just talking about their wages. If we could have another adult in every classroom in this district, I think it would help, I know it costs more money. Everything does. Or take advantage of different programs to get different people in the classroom to deal with the problems, the social problems and things that kids have that take up all of the teacher's time, so they can teach the whole class and not have to worry about those kids. So let's hire a whole bunch of teachers' aides. No, that's my recommendation.
Well, and that's a great public service announcement for any community members that might be watching and have an interest in volunteering,
We
right?
have open
Yeah.
positions.
We have open positions, and please contact your local elementary school, junior high, or secondary school and ask
Or
about volunteer
volunteers, for that
opportunities,
matter.
So
right?
I've mentioned before, for PTOs and everything, to have a big push to get well, they do anyway. They
And
do
I think they do
always,
those
so
things.
it's not any
Yep.
new idea. But I don't think parents, and a lot of parents, I think, they don't realize, because they're not there in the classroom with their kids, realizing what a difference they could make by being another adult.
Being present.
Thank you for that, G.
Thanks,
All
Chief.
right, what, Jim?
Yeah, Gee, thanks for bringing a lot of your points up. I agree. What you just said on the EI, I've been saying that for quite a while, that the EAs don't just need adequate pay, they need to be appreciated for what they can do. And given, especially when you're looking at K through 3, we're not talking about content that requires a master's to deliver, all right? And so it doesn't take somebody with a 140 IQ to teach kids math at that level. So give those EAs that opportunity. I agree with that. And parental volunteers, I think, should be encouraged more. As a parent that went through that, I will say, it didn't always feel like you were welcome in the classroom. In fact, even when we did volunteer, the teacher would say, "Here's the stuff. Go sit in the hall with a kid," and you weren't even in there to see what was going on. And I agree with what you're saying, though, that get the parents, volunteers involved, because you need that. On the kindergarten issue, I'm encouraged. At least I didn't know the data when you said a year ago we were at 30% decrease. This year 17. What kind of interventions are we doing in kindergarten? I know sometimes there's been let's wait and see. They're too young to really address too aggressively.
Believe me, those words have never come out of my mouth.
Okay, I'm just saying, I've heard, that seems to be the pattern.
Not even when I'm dead.
And then, when it came to some of that assessment stuff, was it RTL or whatever it was, what was it called?
RTI.
RTI, thank you for correcting me. There were things like you'd had a certain set of time before you had to identify, and then you had to come up with an intervention, and then you had a certain set of time where you'd intervene, and then maybe it worked, maybe it didn't. How long was the time frame before you intervene again? And then you get to the end of the year, and you made gains. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't, but it always seemed like the next year you had to start the whole process all over. Is that true? That's my understanding of that. Is there anything that carries through the summer, and is Act 20 going to change that?
So to answer your question, what are we doing? So still using the universal screening data, I think all of those same practices are in place. We just call them EMLSS now instead of RTI. We like to do that in education, right?
All right.
Change it up every once in a while,
Change
just when
the-
you think you have it.
Rearrange the deck chairs.
Yep. And we provide those interventions, and I would say particularly at the primary level, they're focused on phonemic awareness, phonics. So there is still a very prescribed approach to a 4 to 6 week intervention focused on a specific skill with weekly progress monitoring. Are you making progress? Are you not? If you're not, then we're going to change the intervention. We're either going to make it longer, we're going to make your group size smaller, we're going to change the intervention, we're going to increase the amount of time that you're in the intervention. We run for another 4 to 6 weeks. If you don't respond to your instruction during that additional 4 to 6 weeks, then it's an SST conversation that we would involve parents in, and we would be talking about additional diagnostic testing.
Got it.
Yeah, so it
That's
does
what you
not need to
refer-
lapse a whole year.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it is
On the-
absolutely untrue that kindergartners cannot make that amount of progress because they're only 5.
And there are a lot of
Yep,
other
it's a sore spot.
informal interventions, Jim, that take place that don't follow that exact structure
Right.
that teachers
It, to,
include.
I understand the intent of your comment. I just want to point out that our K-3 teachers are probably the hardest working, most dedicated,
Oh, I'm
most
not
competent teachers we
discounting
have in
that
the
at all.
district. Not low IQ. So they're really
No, I'm not discounting that
I
at
know
all.
what you meant.
I'm saying that sometimes there's a tendency to
Think
say,
you
well,
can't do
only the teacher can do this.
Right, right.
When in those situations, certainly can put responsibility to the EA that sometimes there's a hesitancy
Yeah.
because they don't have an
the
education
volunteers,
degree.
yeah.
And so, or the volunteer that comes in and says, well, you don't have an education degree, so you
Right.
can't teach these math facts, so.
And that's probably true at all grade levels. then.
Teachers are really utilizing our EAs for a lot of instructional purposes in the classrooms. They're involved in a lot of our professional development when it comes to new resources. They're involved in meetings with staff. So our EAs are working really, really, really hard to support students and teachers.
And there's a statistical comment on, similar to what G made about our Ed Services meeting when we talked about the number of kids at Rochelle involved versus the number of kids at Stevens Point involved. Similarly, when you threw up the race discrepancies up there, we've got, a couple hundred black kids and we've got, how many thousand white kids. And when you're talking about that big a difference, you're looking at 2,000 white kids who aren't at level versus
Correct.
100. And so I just would hope that we're not ignoring the 2,000
No.
and targeting a curriculum plan that says, well, we're going to focus on this. I get we want to work on better outcomes for all, but I would hope that it's not in a sense that, we're going to focus here and be.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. No, it is absolutely. Yeah.
We've lost a student, a family that I know has felt that way, and they're going on to another school because they were asking for help and weren't getting it. And said, well, you're not quite where you need to be. I got too many other kids that need the help, so you're not going to get the help.
Yeah, that is 100% not the message. No, and many of those 2,000 white kids that maybe are still underperforming, right, might fall into another category, like students that have a disability or students that are socioeconomically disadvantaged. So our system cannot be built or revised on giving more to one to give less to another, right? It has to be how to give more to all. Right, and I think that's always been really an important factor in how I do what I do.
Mike?
I just want to note, I liked in the last board update that we're talking about a phone policy. And I know that's it's a controversial, and I know we're in beginning stages of it, but I know for, my kids who are teachers, even second grade teachers, the distractions that kids have with phones in the classroom,
It's impacting learning
it's
significantly.
impacting learning for them and for other kids in the classroom. So I applaud us and I know there are districts around the country that have created, plans and are seeing really positive results from that. So I just, again, I don't even want to think about what I would have done, when I was in high school if I had a phone that was dinging or buzzing every 10 minutes or 5 minutes. So I appreciate our district is taking a look at that seriously as well.
More to come.
Thank you, Meg.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
We have a phone policy. We've had one for years.
And we
Hasn't
do have
been enforced.
right, and we have handbook language, and it's a really good point, G. Some of this is just a recalibration on what are our expectations, and then
I think
communicating
that-
those out.
And I brought this up at our meeting that you said it doesn't really rise to the level of a board issue. But I do think whatever policy is developed, it would be helpful for the board to say, that's our stamp.
Absolutely.
That we're telling everybody, from the top level, we support this and you need to enforce it. From the classroom to the top of the administration.
And at this point, right, really conversations are still pretty preliminary until we leaf through kind of the finer details of what changes we'll make. But certainly, you know, we wanted to provide the board with an update in terms of the conversations are happening and the work is occurring. So when we have that more finalized, certainly if that's an interest, we can bring it back.
But I do want to take exception to something you said before. Well, not exactly, but you said we're trying to provide more for all students, and we certainly are. But some students need more than other students. My 3 kids went through here, they could have had anybody, and they were learning, and lots of other kids are learning, and they're, you know, we say it crassly, they're cheap to educate, because they don't need much, you know. But some students need a lot. And I really believe that the kids on the lower end of the scores, if we can make that gap smaller, not like this or like this, but like this, that we'll see our scores go up.
Without question.
Because our top kids are doing great. These kids who need help, and they need a bigger stool.
Agreed.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Chris. I think you're going to sleep
Great
well
job,
tonight.
Chris.
I appreciate your time and your effort
right.
for you and the team. And I think
Absolutely.
we are going to keep you there and
That's right.
move to
Not off the
agenda
hook
item.
yet, right?
Do you need another bottle of water?
No.
Agenda item 12 under general, we have the budget evaluation process.
And the budget evaluation update this month will be relatively brief. We just wanted to sort of bring closure to some of the work that's been completed up to this point as we round out the fiscal year here and coming up on the end of June. We wanted to provide the board and the community with an update on work that will continue. I'm going to focus on the far right column in terms of work that we will continue to do over the next few summer months where we have perhaps a bit of a slower pace and maybe less distraction, continuing to try to work our way through that program review, and also continue to establish that we're making transparent and responsible decisions around financial resources following the successful referendum. So that work is ongoing. I wish I could say that as the fiscal year concludes, that ends. We know it doesn't. That certainly will be continuing work. Update on program evaluation. We've now completed 30 of the 42 identified programs, so this feels really good to me. We're getting closer to the end point. I will say and I will share that many of the programs that are left will require a significant amount of data collection, so I have intentionally left them till the end because I just have not had time to dig into that to the degree that it needs to be dug into. I shared with the board when we were together in May that one of our goals in the upcoming months when we return in August is to now engage at least our leadership team as a group of stakeholders to sort of fill them in on some of the data that's been collected and how do we now coordinate some appropriate responses to the data that we've collected and the questions that have been raised. In other words, where might there be opportunities to examine cuts that could potentially be made, efficiencies that could be gathered? We don't feel like we're making those recommendations, but we certainly know that we need input from additional stakeholders, and it will also likely at some point involve teachers in those discussions. So 30 have been completed. We have 2 programs that are currently under review, Project Search and OLC, or the Online Learning Center courses that are offered. Neither of those are large cost programs, but they're certainly programs that we want to take a closer look at the historical data on. As part of staffing and our analysis up to this point, we've completed 255 staff positions have been reviewed. 240 of that 255 have been filled as is. 6 are still currently frozen, and 9 of those positions were decreased or eliminated. So the 6 and the 9 are not changes from what we reported out on last month in May. The only change that you see there are the number reviewed and the number that were categorized as fill as is. I did want to land here, just circling back on some information that Mike Kurtz shared at our business services meeting last Monday. In terms of last month, I shared kind of the projection for that additional $10.8 million that will factor into the budget for the upcoming year, the additional $8.75 that comes as a result of the referendum, as well as the $2.2 that comes as a result of the $325 per pupil allocation increase in state funding. The other thing that we need to account for, and how does that $10.8 million get spent? In the budget, we saw Tom share out earlier, the preliminary budget, and what we were able to see there was addressing that budget deficit was projected to be at approximately $5.2 million, and we shared that figure very publicly and often as part of our referendum campaign. We've now, over time, realized that that deficit might exceed that $5.2 million mark just slightly based on some changes. We know in this world of budgeting, everything is just a projection, but we see some slight fluctuations in terms of projected expenses maybe landing in a place that's slightly higher than what we anticipated. We also have some revenues that have come in slightly higher than we anticipated, so that's good news. We're anticipating as we close out this fiscal year, as part of budget eval, that projected deficit will land somewhere between 4.7 million and 6.7 million. So I realize that's a large span, right? Like that feels like a large margin of error. But we're thinking that the projected deficit that we'll be addressing in the upcoming year in our budget will be slightly above that $5.2 million that we talked about initially. I do want to point out here the yellow line there, and Tom referenced to this earlier. Why is that highlighted on this particular slide and in this scenario A and B? That is the outgoing or the transfer that goes to Fund 27 to support special education costs in our district. The ongoing work, again, I'm going to just highlight here that last bullet, which really does sort of lay the groundwork for what is the next step of budget evaluation and program evaluation rolled together. And that is really our goal as an administrative team. This is Corey and myself primarily. We're going to talk a little bit about this at retreat as well. How do we sort of put some teeth in what do we feel like are both realistic and attainable goals in terms of cost savings based on the data we've collected up to this point. We also want to put mechanisms in place that allow us to be able to share that out on a monthly basis. Both Jeff and I meet with our secondary and elementary leadership teams respectively twice each month. And how can we make them aware of the cost savings that we're trying to gather or identify throughout the course of the year so that we're holding ourselves accountable for finding those. Sometimes Jeff and I feel a little bit like we're doing all of this cost savings work when we're in this room as a full cabinet, and then we go out and we have conversations with our leaders who think that there isn't necessarily a need to save additional funds because we've passed a $14 million referendum. So how can we inform our stakeholders of the work that we're trying to accomplish collectively here as a district? And that concludes the budget evaluation report for this month, but I'd be happy to entertain questions if there are any.
I think we're questioned out. Thank you so much, Chris.
All right.
Appreciate it. Moving on to agenda item 12B, we have future meetings, dates, and times. For the next school board meeting, it's June 24th. Oh, sorry, our board retreat is June 24th, 5 p.m. start time, so please note that. On July 8th, we have a meeting, only if needed. So for those that are newer to the board, sometimes in July, if there are no topics, we have the month off. And then August 12th, we have a regular board meeting. As a reminder to all the community members that might be listening, our meetings are now held at 6 p.m. And then for Ed Services, just a reminder, Ed Services Committee meets the first Monday of the month at 5:30. Business Services HR meets the first Monday of the month at 6:30.
Where, you said the retreat's at MSTC now?
Yep.
Like, is there a room or something?
We are in
Community
the
engagement
community
room.
room. So,
6:34. Go in and turn to the left.
there you go.
Go down to the end on the left.
And there's a door to enter down there too.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Off of 3rd Street.
Really?
It's a really big room, so there's lots of space in there.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Agenda item 13, closed session. Enter into closed session. I am looking for a motion to convene into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.85, paren 1, paren C, specifically concerning employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee.
Second.
Motion by Dennis, second by G. Carlin, can you please call roll?
Mr. Robbie.
Yes.
Mr. Pope.
Yes.
Mr. Kowalski.
Yes.
Mr. Summers.
Yes.
Ms. Portson.
Yes.
Mr. Lepak.
Yes.
Mr. Shader.
Aye.
Ms. Erler.
Yes.
Ms. Bushman.
Yes.
And motion carries.
Thank you. Yeah, do you guys want to come back at, do you want 5 minutes?
Yeah.
So 8:07? Okay.